in your script, okay?
Okay.
So in 3, 2.
Good evening. I now call to order the Equity Committee meeting with the Equity Advisory Council for Thursday, January 13th, 2022. In accordance with the Board of Education's amended resolution approved at the October 13th, 2020 board meeting, in the event of a medical or health emergency related to COVID-19, the board chair, in consultation with vice chair and the superintendent, may declare that a board meeting or a board committee meeting be held remotely in its entirety without the physical presence of board members, or in a hybrid manner with only some individual board members participating remotely, subject to the establishment of a mechanism that would allow each board member the opportunity to fully participate in the meeting despite not being physically present, and that would allow the public to also remotely attend those portions of the meeting that are open pursuant to the Maryland Open Meetings Act by being able to listen and or view those portions of the meeting. As a result, today's Equity Committee meeting is being held virtually and broadcasted through Microsoft Teams Live on the BCPS website. In order to efficiently conduct this meeting, committee and council members will state their name before speaking. Ms. Flast, please call the roll to determine the presence of a quorum of the committee.
Ms. Scott?
Present.
Dr. Hager? Ms. Mack? Ms. Pasteur? Mr. Thomas?
Ms. Scott,
Thank
I'm
you,
here, and I am also on this committee.
Ms. Fass, I was going to say we have there were some updates as far as the board members on the committee.
I apologize, Ms. Rowe.
Present.
Thank you so much.
As well as Miss Jose.
Perfect. Ms. Jose is marked as present. Thank you.
Ms. Scott, Dr. Hager is the second call-in number we have as well.
Oh, okay. Did you call Dr. Hager's name?
I did, but maybe because she's calling in, she may not have been able to unmute herself right away. But it sounds like Mr. Klorn's confirmed that is her number, so I can mark Dr. Hager as present.
Okay, so could you list the board members that are present so that we can confirm?
Of course, I have Ms. Scott, Dr. Hager, Ms. Rowe, and Ms. Jose.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fass.
No problem.
All right, and Ms. Fass, if you could please call the roll to determine the presence of a quorum of the, I guess, well, not a quorum, but please call the roll of the Equity Advisory Council members participating in today's call.
Sure. I have Dr. Miriam Yarborough.
Present.
Dr. Mary McComas. Mr. Handy.
Hello.
Present.
Ms. Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Who is that speaking?
This is Ms. Jose. I had trouble unmuting myself.
Thank you, Ms. Jose. Yes, we can hear you.
Abby Plussin. Abir Shanawi. Avery Webb. Dr. Bash Farrowan. Bianca Crockett. Brianna Ross.
Present.
Clifford Collins. Donna Sibley.
Present.
Aaron O'Toole Trivis. Dr. Aaron Sullivan.
Present.
Oh, thank you. Frank Dunlap. Heather Denmeyer.
Present.
Jackie Brewster.
Present.
Jane Lee. Julie Zelinsk. Kelvin Ganesh. Kevin Jennings.
Present.
Lauren Tillman,
Present.
Lena Polite, Lisa Norton, Maggie Cummins, Marcellus McQueen, Maria Lowry,
Present.
Marlena Purcell Colton, Megan Stewart Sticking, Michelle Stansberry,
Present.
Monica Joins Massey, Dr. Monica Sample,
Present.
Sam Tillman, Dr.
Present, sorry.
Oh, no problem, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Scott Krugman, Shane Jensen,
Present.
Sherelle Jones,
Present.
Solomon Davis, Tiffany Stith, and Dr. Zamira Simpkins. That is the entirety of the advisory council.
Ms. Scott, if I may, before we move on from attendance.
Yes, I was going to ask next for staff. Yes.
Okay, so I do know it looks like Ms. Polite says she cannot unmute. And I also got notice from Marcellus McQueen that he's here but cannot unmute. So, Mr. Corns, I don't know if that's anything you can help us with, but I wanted to make mention of those two council members, and then I'll turn it back over to Ms. Scott.
This is Lena Polite. It's been fixed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Dr. Handy, I don't see Marcellus McQueen as in this portion of the Teams meeting. It could be that they're viewing the live event stream, but they are not in the current in attendee list.
Okay, got you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Corns.
Great, thank you for that. And Ms. Fass, if you could please call the names of those staff members attending today's meeting.
At this time, I do not see any additional staff members, but if I've missed anyone, please, you may state your name at this time.
Okay, thank you. And are there any additional board members joining who we did not name? All right, thanks. Okay, so we will get right to it. It looks like the first item of new business is a review of the report on the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 23 operating budget. And for that, I call on Mr. Handy.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott. So good evening to all of our attendees this evening. For the next portion, and really the major portion of this evening's meeting, we wanted to get the council members a chance to provide input on Dr. Williams' proposed budget for FY 2023. So to go about that, I'd like to share with you the presentation that Dr. Williams made on Tuesday at the board meeting. So it is the video. It's about 20 minutes long, and I understand some of you may have seen this video. But I want to make sure that really the level set that we've all had a chance to see Dr. Williams' presentation to do it justice. And then after the presentation, I'd like to get your input on the budget items he proposed. And for that process, we're really going to use the same organization that you'll see that has been used to organize the proposed budget. So it's really based on our strategic plan, the compass. So we'll start with learning, accountability, and results. And what I'm going to ask is that the council members take a look at the presentation, and then I'm going to share the budget document on the screen, and you'll see the line items. And I'd like the council members to make note of their top 3 line items, if you will. So we're asking the council members to share their priorities. So, and I'll go over these instructions after we watch the video, but just to frame what we're going to do. So you'll look at the video presentation, you'll hear Dr. Williams present the proposed budget, and then we'll take a look at the document of the proposed budget. And then I'll ask every council member to make note of their top 3 priorities from that budget, from learning, accountability, and results. From there, we'll move on to the second section, which is safe and supportive environment. And then time allowing, we'll move on to high performing workforce and alignment of human capital. And then there's some items in operational excellence that may be of interest to some council members, so we'll make sure we get input there as well. All right. So any questions at this point before I share Dr. Williams' presentation via video? All right, so I will share the video. And Mr. Corns, I'm okay to share now, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Handy, took a second to unmute. Yes, you are. And please also, when you go to share, make sure that you hit the slider that says include system audio so that the sound will come through, okay?
Yes, sir, will do. Thank you.
The motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the report on the superintendent's proposed FY 2023 operating budget. And for that, I call on Dr. Williams.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to present my proposed fiscal year 2023 operating budget to you this evening. I would like to begin with a short video highlighting our commitment to BCPS students, staff, and families.
Baltimore County leaders, the Board of Education, and members of the community have always made an investment in BCPS students and schools a priority, and there is no doubt that our community continues to receive a strong return on the investment it makes in our students. The BCPS operating budget lays out the strategies we will use to achieve our goals and matches them with the investments we need to implement the strategy. Student learning is our main priority and at the core of all of our work. We inspire learning by striving to provide the greatest public education to each and every student.
Nice job, Joshua. You found orange.
We have before us an opportunity to create a school system where academic success is not predictable by race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, language, or disability, where we can continue to attract and retain the very best and highly effective teachers, supporting staff members, and administrators. We stand at a crossroads. This is a critical time for our school system to leverage resources and make significant investments that will bolster our ability to provide world-class teaching and learning in a safe and supportive environment for every BCPS student. Our students are worth it. Our staff is worth it. Team BCPS is worth it. This is our time.
So I would like to thank the BCPS-TV and the communication team for that inspirational video. As this slide illustrates, and go back to the slide, our strategic plan guides our priority work and serves as the framework for fiscal year 23 budget requests. Okay, there we go. In June of 2020, I presented and the board approved the new strategic plan for the system called the Compass, our pathway to excellence. The strategic plan development was guided by insights we received from Team BCPS during my first 100 days as superintendent. From the various engagement efforts, 5 priorities emerged, forming the foundation of the strategic plan: learning accountability results, safe and supportive environment, high-performing workforce and alignment of human capital, community engagement and partnerships, and operational excellence. As part of our continued efforts to recover and rebuild, we must collaboratively create the climate and conditions necessary for collective healing for our system. The FY23 budget must address the impact of COVID-19 in our school communities. We know that the last 20 months have been a period of exponential change. This challenging time serves as an important reminder of how critical it is for us to strengthen our efforts to ensure high-quality teaching and learning for every student in a safe and supportive learning environment. The pandemic continues to impact our students' academic progress and social-emotional well-being. We have also seen a drop in elementary enrollment. Additionally, we are experiencing staffing shortages and challenges with retention that further impact morale. The proposed FY 2023 budget lays out a strategy to address these concerns through targeted and significant investments. We have taken several steps to keep our students safe in the classroom while offering a remote learning option to those students who cannot yet return to in-school personal learning. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the need to deepen our focus and investment in 2 overarching areas. 1, high-quality teaching and learning, social-emotional learning, and community building, specifically teaching and learning aligned with state and national standards. And 2, equity, resources, and additional support that helps us identify and mitigate barriers to engagement. The proposed FY 2023 operating budget will provide the critical foundation BCPS needs to align its work with the blueprint for Maryland's future and ensure the success of our school system. The blueprint for Maryland's future establishes in law the policies and accountability recommendations of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education. The law took effect July 1st of 2020 and has 5 major policy areas: early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness pathways, including career and technical education, more resources to ensure all students are successful, and governance and accountability. The clear alignment between the blueprint and our strategic plan presents new opportunities to reimagine public education, leverage resources, and make significant investments that will bolster our ability to provide world-class teaching and learning for every BCPS student. In the time of our perpetual change, it is vital that we remain focused on high-yield priorities that help us reach our goals. This year, we are focused on 4 key goals: accelerating learning, promoting social-emotional wellness, setting standards of excellence, and increasing data literacy. This laser-like focus on key areas is in direct response to the changing needs of our system. Our student population continues to grow in diversity, and we celebrate our rich and varied backgrounds. Take a look at the students we served in 1986, compared with our student population this year. We are now educating a much more diverse population. 40.4% of our students identify as African American, 7.1% Asian, 14.0% Hispanic, and 5.2% multiracial. This significant demographic shift mirrors that seen across our state and across the nation. Since school year 1977, BCPS student demographics have shifted from a predominantly white school system to one that demonstrates considerable diversity. While mobility rates have improved from 10 years ago, they persist. Currently, 1 out of every 5 children is moving within the system. During the pandemic, we saw a significant spike in FY 2020, followed a steep decline in FY 2021. The FY 23 budget proposal takes into consideration the need to respond to demographic and mobility trends. In the midst of ongoing change, the spotlight remains on our BCPS students. Our students are counting on all of us to work in tandem to meet their dynamic and unique needs. While our student population only grew slightly this year, the needs of our students are increasing. We have a rapidly growing second language population and an increase in students who are eligible for free and reduced price meals. As of September 30th, our enrollment was 111,120 students, with 53.9% of our students eligible for free and reduced price meals. We have seen a 44% increase in the number of students eligible for free and reduced price meals over the past decade. Our English language learners have grown by 205% overall and by 17% in the past year. The number of homeless children increased by 20.6% over the past 12 years. Our farms rate took a steep increase last year, likely related to pandemic-associated economic disruptions. The BCPS graduation rate of 88.5% for the class of 2020 exceeds the Maryland state average of 86.8%. Class of 2021 data will be available from MSDE in the next few months. While we celebrate the achievements of our students, we know we have more work to do to ensure our students are college and career ready. Although we have seen improvement in our overall graduation rate, we know that significant gaps between student groups still remain. Our data confirms that some students need more time to develop a positive trajectory and graduate. I believe this extra time can help prepare our students to access post-secondary career and college options. Dropout rates for the class of 2020 went from 8.8% the previous year to 8.3%. Yes, we will continue to identify root causes for our student groups and strive to lessen these rates. I believe targeting students as early as middle school and developing a 6-year plan with access and opportunities can help improve dropout rates. Our students receiving special ed services saw a rapid growth from FY 2015 to FY 2020. Although those populations have declined along with overall enrollment, needs still exceed resources. Our population of English language learners has increased by 205% since FY 2010 and 16.6% in the past year. We will continue to provide the necessary resources and supports for our English language learners to ensure equitable access to all programming. Our enrollment losses are concentrated with our youngest learners, who last year were challenged the most by remote learning. Enrollment is projected to bounce back to pre-pandemic positive growth trends. So the proposed budget focuses on two key areas of our school system: people and progress. It is centered on our core purpose of increasing achievement for all students and a variety of pathways to prepare students for college and careers. We are addressing learning acceleration through high-quality teaching and learning, social-emotional learning, and community building. This budget proposes increasing compensation to address vacancies. It responsibly identifies $7.7 million in cost reductions and includes a proposed increase of 356.3 FTEs and $178.4 million. Additionally, the proposal includes specific requests in the following areas: special education, English language learners, and additional staff, magnet support and school per pupil allocation or school budget increases, emotional support staff, and critical maintenance and transportation. Through the COVID-related grants of $395.6 million received primarily via the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, or ESSER, we have been able to fund critical initiatives BCPS that could not have otherwise afforded. These initiatives include classroom support, extended day, summer school, tutoring, special ed, and a virtual learning program, or known as VLP. In alignment with the efficiency review, this budget proposal includes responsible cost reductions in the amount of $7.7 million. These savings include a reduction of 9.0 FTEs and totaling $1.7 million through the reorganization of cabinet and $6.0 million through device cost reductions. So the focus areas: the FY 2023 proposed budget is closely aligned to the BCPS strategic plan. Significant proposals are geared towards our goal of raising the bar, closing gaps, and preparing for our future. To accelerate learning across the pandemic-driven learning loss, I am proposing a variety of targeted initiatives under learning accountability and results. The budget includes 210.5 special ed positions, including elementary IEP chairs, teachers, paraeducators, and related services. 44 ESOL positions, 34.3 positions required for the new Northeast Elementary School, $400,000 for Red House Run startup expense and moving costs for the new school, 8.5 FTEs, and $1.5 million to support expanded magnet programs previously supported by a grant. As mentioned earlier, reduced contracts and conversions of high school students to Chromebooks will result in a savings of $6 million. In addition, 12 assistant principals and support staff, 1.0 FTE for the Watershed Charter School, a 5% increase in school per pupil funding of $600,000, and 22 staff development teachers for elementary schools. Now we can clap if you think that's a good idea. All right. Safe and supportive environment. BCPS is taking a comprehensive approach in addressing the social and emotional well-being of our students and the FY23 proposed budget reflects that. Significant resources are proposed to support students impacted emotionally by the pandemic, including 33 school counselors, 22 health assistants and 2 health supervisors, 1.0 fiscal assistant for psychological services, 10 social workers, and 1.0 social worker supervisor. This budget addresses critical staffing, hiring, and retention issues through increased targeted compensation. So, this budget includes $18.1 million for salary steps, $52.1 million for cost of living adjustments, $28.5 million for employee incentives and wage scale restructuring, $1.3 million to cover mandatory minimum wage increases, $3.4 million for extended day support, long-term subs and lunchroom assistants. Positions such as AAs, lunchroom assistants, or kindergarten assistants will see their hourly wages increase to $14 an hour under this proposal. $2.9 million to increase substitute and temporary employee wages above minimum wage. $200,000 to provide step equivalent increases for executive directors and chief, and $100,000 to adjust the central office budget wage scale. Oh, I'm not done yet. $3.4 million to contract with Kelly Services to manage the substitute placement and hiring process. $600,000 for increases in national board certification associated with the blueprint legislation. A transfer of 24.0 blueprint funded positions to special revenue. Benefit increases for new and existing employees of $16.8 million. As previously noted, the reorganization of my cabinet will yield a net reduction of 9 positions and $1.7 million. Now we can clap. That's a big one. We also must invest in our critical infrastructure needs. This budget does that. Transportation replacement vehicles for $300,000, 3.0 FTEs for facility construction build to learn staffing, increase current bus contractor fees by $2.0 million, non-FTEs and 3 contract maintenance, housekeeping, and ground services for $6.7 million, 1.0 facilities, school support specialists, $300,000 for energy management software. Next slide. $900,000 for air purifier filters, $1.5 million for information technology security software, $4.9 million for technology support contractors to support student devices, $2.7 million for classroom display panels, $400,000 for transportation vehicle lifts, $100,000 for transportation safety vans, $800,000 for school flooring, $500,000 for construction document management, and $900,000 to cover utility cost inflation. You can see here a summary of all the initiatives in the proposed budget. The grand total of new initiatives include 381.3 positions and $172.4 million. So my request for FY23 is very significant, but we must address our critical needs. The general fund budget, which contains majority of the day-to-day spending for schools and offices, including most salaries, is proposed at $1.86 billion for FY 2023, which is $178.4 million above FY 2022 and 20.9% above required local maintenance of effort, or MOE. The BCPS FY23 proposed budget for all funds, including general fund, special revenue or grant fund, capital project fund, Debt Service and Enterprise Food Services Fund totals $2.43 billion, which is an increase of $115 million versus FY22. So, upcoming FY23 budget meetings include public hearing on January 18th, board work session on January 25th, and the board vote to adopt the FY 2023 budget on February the 8th. This concludes my presentation of the proposed FY 23 operating budget.
Great, thank you for that, Mr. Handy. And so now I guess we can open it up if there's any questions or input that anyone may have. I mean, I can pretty much start it off with that. Mr. Handy, I wanted to know if you could identify what in the budget is specific in regards to equity and the equity lens that we've all been using. How was that used when crafting the budget?
Sure. So, Ms. Scott, I certainly gave input for my respective department. I was not privy to what was applied, what was done from that point on. However, for this evening, just as you mentioned, I would ask that our council members, apply their equity lens and looking at the line items and determining what would be their priorities in that proposed budget based on, their equity lens and their rationale. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to present, I was going to present the budget document so they can look at the line items and talk about their priorities from an equity standpoint.
That would be great. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Scott. And Ms. Fass, if you could assist me, I'm going to, I'll share the budget document, but could you call the council members' names so we can, just get some, make sure everyone gets a chance to give their input. Would you be okay with that?
Yes, of course. If council members could either type their name in the chat or raise their hand, then I'll be happy to call out members one at a time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Bass. So just to reiterate, hopefully everyone can see my screen. So this is the budget document. These are all public documents available on the BCPS website. So Dr. Williams presented his proposed budget, and here we're going to start with learning, accountability, and results. So what I'd like for each council member to look at these different line items. So you start with school-based funding or school-based per pupil funding, the 5% rate increase. Next item will be new Northeast Elementary School. And you can see what's being proposed as far as FTEs and salaries, and then the total proposal for that line item. And when you look at this, the learning, accountability, results, out of these line items, what would be your top three priorities as a council member? So what we're looking for is a chance for the council to share with our board equity committee their perspective on the priorities after watching this FY23 budget presentation. Okay. So with that being said, do we have someone that wants to start, or Ms. Fass, if you want to call someone, but if we have someone who's ready to go, that might be a good place to start. Would anyone like to start us off?
It looks like we have Miss Heather Denmeyer who has volunteered.
All right, excellent.
Good evening. It is quite an honor to be here this evening, and I am so pleased to see some of the things in the proposed budget. I feel very comforted, actually, that a lot of what we have been asked as administrators, but especially as elementary school principals, what we need to really move our school forward and support all students. One of the things that comes to mind immediately for me personally at my school is a stat teacher. One of the things that I also have regional programs at my schoolhouse as well. So one of the things we're always looking to do is, of course, to support our teachers and really have structures and supports in place to ensure that we have that effective first instruction, because there is really a very persistent and widening gap for many of our students, especially our special education students. So I am happy to see my kind of top three: a stat teacher, special ed programs, and IEP chairs for elementary schools. I don't know that I believe that one is personally impactful to my school, but I think that that's important for all of our schools to look at how our assistant principals can support instruction and not have the IEP process or team process be impacted negatively. So those are my top three. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you. Next, we have Miss Sherelle Jones.
Good evening, everyone. Personally, as a current 5th grade teacher in an elementary school and a PAR panel teacher, I get to see a wide lens of things. And based on what Dr. Williams presented, I would say that my top priority would be the ESOL the English Language Learners Program, considering that our population of ESOL students is skyrocketing. And that's evidence that my school, we have definitely shot up and could use some more support with that. And I see that across the county. My second would both be the special education placements. That's been significantly challenging to fill those positions, but to definitely even have more positions available as the number of kids we seem to have to focus on is increasing and their needs are exponentially greater than we have seen in the past. And then my third would be the staff development teachers. I would be at a loss if our stat teacher, or I'm sorry, staff development teacher now, was taken away from us, as she's been a great support for helping all of our teachers meet a wide range of needs, and you're only one person with 20 to 30 kids in your classroom. It's easier to have someone who is able to provide that support. So replacing those people back in buildings would be one of my top three.
Thank you. Do we have any other volunteers?
Hi, I guess I could jump in here. Yeah, I'm Sam Tillman. I'm a chair of visual arts at Hereford High School. And one thing I was thinking about this year is how the pandemic and a lot of the just messaging and trying to sort of manage it has really, in some ways, I think, taken some of the time that would, and some of the sort of the mental energy that would have been focused on equity work. I think there's a lot of goodwill, but the administration is trying not to overload teachers with meetings and things like that. And sometimes I think that this kind of work gets sort of pushed off. I'm curious if that's been the experience at other schools as well. Obviously, this is a major situation to deal with, but it does come. This is just sort of one of the costs, it seems to me, as well. Is sort of a shift in focus or emphasis. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Looks like we have Aaron Sullivan. Sorry, Ms. Sullivan, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Thank you. As the ESOL coordinator, I would say my #1 priority is English learner programs and any funding to support FTE and also some of the supports for our multilingual families in general with communication. So that would be my #1. I also think that I know that our special education programs also often don't have the human resources that they need. So that would be my second. And then I would say assistant principals and support staff. I think this past year has shown how if schools aren't staffed appropriately, that when there are these challenges, it's harder to manage things that are going on with the pandemic. So I think ensuring that all of the schools have the appropriate number of assistant principals, I think is really important.
Thank you. Next looks like it's Miss Jackie Brewster.
So I think a lot of us are saying the same thing. The English learner program, the special education placements, and then I would add also that 5% rate increase for per pupil funding.
Thank you, Miss Brewster. And it looks like we have Miss Donna Sibley.
Thank you very much. Yes, I agree with many of what has been said. From what I'm hearing from many of the stakeholders, I would say the ESOL program, the staff development for teachers, and the support staff and assistant principals. And that also the 5%, I had 4 in there. So thank you.
Thank you. Were there any others?
Ms. Scott, I do know we wanted to hear from some parents, and not to put anybody on the spot, but I believe Ms. Shinawi, she's one of our parent representatives. I think she was not able to raise a hand, but if Ms. Shinawi, are you able to share?
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Good evening. As Doug said, my name is Avir Shinawi. I am a parent and former Baltimore County employee. This concern was raised last time that I spoke, but I would still like to see more professional development and more support from counseling and social emotional learning for Muslim students. I am being contacted by parents and other people in the county with the rise of harassment, especially Muslim girls who wear the hijab. And schools are really not well equipped on how to handle the situation. And also with the rise of anti-Muslim rhetoric that's happening across the nation, I would like to see a little bit more of an emphasis on some social emotional learning and an emphasis on finding counselors who can meet the needs of our Muslim students, because they do feel like they're being silenced and they don't have anyone that they can go to who could understand where they're coming from. And it's not just for the girls who are wearing hijab. They're mainly targeted because physically you can tell that they're Muslim, but also, again, talking about the intersectionalities of students who are Muslim but don't appear Muslim, and then they may hear comments or they may face bullying that other people aren't aware that they are Muslim. And then kind of to go along with what Aaron Sullivan was talking about, we have a lot of immigrant and migrant students now coming from countries that are Muslim majority who need to really adapt, and they need to have the support necessary to adjust, but also somebody, again, who really understands their background and where they're coming from and that culturally relevant piece. And so that's what I would like to see Baltimore County make a push for, and include the idea on the very first page of the equity policy, including religion. I know it's in the wording in other parts of the policy, but I think it's very important to bring it to the very forefront, the very first page, because when we're talking about religion, we're also not just talking about Muslim students or Muslim females. We can talk about boys who are from the Sikh faith, who wear the turban, or Jewish boys who wear the kippah when they go to school, or other people who may dress in a way that outwardly shows their religion. So I'd like to see a little bit more of a charge from Baltimore County with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all very good points. Mr. Haney, were there any other parents?
So, Ms. Scott, just if I'm reflecting on roll call, I don't believe we had any other parents present. However, I'll pause just to see if we do. Okay, it looks like no other parent representatives. I did want to share from one of our principals, Principal Jennings. He did have to leave the location where he was on the call, but I did want to share some of his priorities. So Principal Jennings, for him, he is, in full disclosure, he's the principal of the new Northeast Elementary School. So he said, of course, that's a priority for him, along with staff development and IEP chairs in elementary school. So just wanted to make sure we captured his priorities as well.
Great, thank you. And, oh, it looks like Ms. Fass said that Ms. Marcellus McQueen was present. Did she have any suggestions or priorities?
Sorry, that was in response to Mr. Thomas's question regarding students present.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I do know Mr. McQueen was trying to speak. He said he was having some trouble, I guess, being able to speak because he heard the roll call. And I know Mr. Corns was looking into it. So I don't know if Mr. McQueen can hear me, if he can speak, or didn't know what his capability was, or if he has some feedback in regards to the budget. But certainly wanted to hear from some students, as Mr. Thomas mentioned.
Thank you. I just, Miss Scott, is it okay if I address Mr. Handy?
Sure. I was saying, is Mr. McQueen here or?
Yes.
Okay.
I just called him. He said that he was having difficulties joining, like Mr. Handy said, and he's been watching live.
Okay.
So he will email over his suggestions. He said.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, and please go ahead if you had. Oh, that was what you wanted to let us know. Okay. And my other, I guess, item would be is Mr. Handy. So now that we've heard from our stakeholders and what they would like to see included or make sure is addressed, what are the next steps? Is this being put together in a report to then be presented to the superintendent to be included, or what happens next?
Sure, Ms. Scott. So, so we certainly have our official minutes, which would be this recording. So everything is recorded. And I can certainly summarize so the committee members can review what's being shared. I would like, if it's okay with you, we do have a couple other areas here from the compass. Would you be okay if we moved it? Now, safe and supportive environment has, only 4 line items. However, would it be okay if we got some input on that area and perhaps the high performing workforce and alignment of human capital? If we have some time for that, we could get a little more input, and then that would be really the official input from the council. Yes. And then in addition to what they're sharing this evening, of course, we have the session on the 18th where council members and anyone else can provide feedback for you and fellow board members. But if it's okay with you, yep, are we okay looking at the other areas as well?
Yes, that's perfectly fine. We want to make sure this is inclusive and that people are able to, our stakeholders are able to really give their input in regards to equity and making sure that we are addressing that in the budget. So yes, please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott. So again, we'll move on to safe and supportive environment. Same process. If you can identify, we can still go to the top 3. Again, there's only 4 to choose from, but would certainly like the equity committee here to hear what you consider to be priorities in that area. So if we can go through the same process and have folks share their priorities in that regard for safe and supportive environment. And Ms. Fass, I'll ask if you can help again, please. Thank you.
This is Lena Polite. I didn't put my name in the chat, but I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. And I think for me, just looking at the budget, it's not necessarily for me, what are my priorities? Like, it's hard to pick out, this is more important. School counseling is more important than health services. Like, it's hard to do those types of things. But for me, when you're looking not just in the safe and supportive environment, but also in the previous section, and then some of the sections that follow, it's how is the funding? So, if this budget is approved and, this is the money that comes in, the allocation of those funds. And so they're only school social work, if it's, for 11 is at FTEs or what, how is that allocated across the district and that it's equitably done so? And so that the communities and schools that need those resources actually receive the resources. So I guess that's how I'm looking at this budget and what's a priority for me, versus picking, whether psychological services were more important than social work services. I think more for me is the allocation of these funds and what that looks like once the budget is approved and the money is received.
Thank you, Lena. I believe we had Donna Sibley next.
Thank you. School counseling to me is extremely important with what's going on, particularly in the high schools with your juniors and seniors that haven't been able to, for the last several years, get the testing for, the SATs, things like that. I believe that it's extremely important in all levels, but in the high school level, the school counseling would be one of my top positions, and the health services, particularly with what's going on with COVID at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Were there any others who weren't able to put their name in chat, but if they weren't able to, you could just say your name or raise your hand. Okay, did you have any others, Mr. Handy?
No, ma'am, Ms. Scott, I do not. So we can move on to high performing workforce and alignment of human capital.
Excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you. So I have Marcellus McQueen on the phone. He wanted to speak to the previous one. I can just share him like this.
Say that again, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, I have one of our student council members, Marcellus McQueen, on the phone. He wanted to speak to the safe and supportive environment as well as the first one. I was going to just hold him so you could hear him.
Oh, okay. He wasn't able to call in?
No, he wasn't able to figure that out.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay if I share?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Marcellus.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, so I saw the thing about school counselors. I just want to talk about how this year, for me as being a senior, it was pretty difficult because Randallstown lost one of our counselors, so we only had 2 for the 1,500 students that we have in our building. So it's been very difficult to get that emotional support that we need since we didn't have the bunch of resources like other schools. We also lost our college and career counselor due to the pandemic and budget shortages. So it's been very difficult to get seniors to assistance for the beyond after high school. And I just think that for next year that it should be like very mandatory that we get the help that we need because it's really important.
Thank you. Thanks, Christian. Do we have any other? Okay, yeah, Mr. Handy, you can move on.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scott. So any council members have input for high performing workforce and alignment of human capital?
Okay. All right, doesn't look like there is. All right.
Okay, and I'm thinking if that's the case, I guess when I look at operational excellence, I would not think there would be input, but however, I don't want to just assume. So does anyone have any input on our last section, which would be operational excellence?
It looks like there is something from Ms. Brewster.
Okay.
And actually, I was talking about the category before that. If you slide back down, because all I have to add is that it is good to see that we are going to pay our people salaries that have them remain in Baltimore County. So thank you.
And I would also just like to add that I think anything for employee incentives and compensation steps is really important right now. It's very hard to hold on to high quality teachers. So, and that can be our next struggle if we're losing teachers. So I think anything that we can do to hold on to the teachers who have been working so hard is really important.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. And just as a brief reminder to our council members, if you could please state your name prior to making comment as this is going on the record. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Handy, is there another, was that the last one?
Yes, Ms. Scott. That's the last area. So like I said, I don't think anyone had anything for operational excellence, but if we just want to give an opportunity for anyone to share out on any of these line items before we close out this portion.
Okay. And also I wanted to make sure if there were any committee members who are board members who are here who would like to give any sort of input or any sort of feedback. I wanted to make sure we had an opportunity for that as well. I know there are some of us here. I know we've heard from Mr. Thomas, but are there any board members who had any questions or wanted to give any feedback or had anything additional to add?
Ms. Scott, I have a question. This is
yes, who's speaking?
Mrs. Rowe.
Mr. Rowe, yes, please go ahead.
So my question is, at some point in time, there were some changes to the Title I funding for schools, and some of our positions, such as the behavioral interventionists, were no longer covered, and we removed some of those positions if they were in a school that didn't have a dedicated CELS program. And I wanted to know if this budget funds behavioral interventionists in all of those schools that they were removed from.
Thank you for that. Dr. Yarborough or others, are you able to answer that question?
Good evening, and thank you very much, Ms. Rowe, for that question. Unfortunately, at this time, that is not something that I can provide, but I can look into it and have a response sent to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like there's a question from Mr. Thomas.
Yes, first I just wanted to thank all of our committee members for sharing their budgetary priorities. I have my list right here from this meeting, and this is just one page. There's another page on the back, so I want to thank you all. Looking at operational excellence, which nobody touched on right now, I'm really excited to see those classroom display panels listed there. I know that there was a recent curriculum in the, or a recent contract in the curriculum committee about that. And to my knowledge, and Dr. Yarborough, you can correct me if this is incorrect, those display panels are those smart boards in the classrooms. So replacing those outdated Promethean boards that are no longer working, and instead having those updated smart touchscreen boards that are like TVs that you can move across. I use one of those in my Latin class every day, and they're truly exceptional learning pieces, and I'm excited to see them in all of our schools, which is what the contract was approved for. Also, I'm loving the focus on our teacher retention efforts and on staffing and on paying our staff at a reasonable price. And I'm also excited to see some of the combinations of Blueprint for Maryland and the Build to Learn Act in this budget. I'm excited to dive through the rest of the budget. I have a huge, here it is, right here. I have this last night's board meeting. So I'm excited, and I'm encouraging everyone to attend the hearing on the 18th to continue to discuss your concerns and your wants for this budget. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It looks like there's a comment from Ms. Brewster.
And so I also would like to talk about that last section as well. The transportation, so that our children can safely get back and forth to school, because that for some of our families is difficult if transportation is not available. The information technology security software, thank you very much, because our children can't afford to lose time from school. the air purifier filters, especially in this time. And then I agree with you about the classroom display panels. I am so much looking forward to that, to when they're available in the school building. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Handy, was there anything else?
No, Ms. Scott, nothing else on the budget. So I'll stop sharing this part of my screen.
Okay.
What's that gone?
And did you, or could you put up your email or share it in case anyone had anything else they would like to email? I think you had sent that out already.
Yes, Ms. Scott, I'll put it in the chat. I know some people might not be able to access the chat, so hopefully those that can will have it in the chat, and then I'll do, I can do another follow-up with the council members.
Okay, that's great. Because the next item I have, but I don't know if we've already addressed this, it says the next item is for the council to discuss its budget priorities. But it sounds like we went over that.
Yes, you're correct. So really the last item I believe we have would be just talking about topics. So we have 2 more meetings scheduled with the Equity Committee and the Equity Advisory Council. We would meet in March, and then finally we would meet in May. And we want to talk about some topics. So council members may recall, the committee members generated some topics, really just 2 main topics. One was discussion of the organization and function of the advisory council. So I thought we could dig into that at the March meeting. And then the other request was committee members wanted to hear from advisory council members, like some presentations, perhaps some brief presentations on, priorities and items related to equity within, within their purview. So perhaps we could do some of that in March and May as well. So those were the 2 that I distilled from what the committee shared. But certainly if we want to hear from committee members on other topics of interest, or perhaps the council would like to share some topics.
Yes, that would be great. And that's what I have here is the next item is for us to discuss agenda planning for future dates and topics of this council. So it would be good to hear from the council as to what they would like to discuss and what things we could go over and should be addressing. So we can open up the floor now. If anyone has any suggestions, you can put your name into the chat. Or you can, if you're not able to put your name into the chat, you can just state your name. And Mr. Handy, you had said what you wanted, what a suggestion as far as topics for us to go over. What was your suggestion for March? You've spoken to it briefly.
Yes, so in March, and this was based on input, from you and fellow committee members, there was some talk about, what is the actual goal of our advisory council? What would the function be? What would the organization be? So, a lot of advisory councils will have a chair, perhaps a vice chair, maybe even a secretary. So some talk about that organization. There was also a suggestion to look at perhaps committees for the council. So, we do have principals represented. We have some student representatives. We have some of our area advisory councils. So we might have, committees based on those different affiliations, if you will. So really wanted to talk a little bit about what this structure could actually look like. So that will be part of that organization and function discussion. And then, of course, the other would be presentations based on particular council members' perspective or area of expertise, if you will, of course, related to equity and the Board of Education.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that will help us frame as we build this council and the direction that we go in. Oh, it looks like there's a suggestion from Heather Denmere. You can go ahead. Is she muted?
Hi, I would like to really think about ways that we as members of this committee or this council can work together as far as the ones that are in schoolhouses to look at ways that we can examine the data that is ready and available for us to use, and then to look at, especially with the input of all of the members here, because we all come at this data with a different perspective, and how we could essentially examine the existing data and then move beyond that data and examine what are next steps, what are best practices, and how we could maybe present those either through this board or this council to schoolhouses in support of, not in any way looking at it as they're not doing well, but how can we support you? What are these best practices that exist? I know that there was information shared with us from Doug Handy sent this to us, and I appreciate it because this is the first time I've had kind of this at my fingertips to really sit and look at data of our school system in a really concentrated way that helped me really think about what I want to do in my own schoolhouse based on what that system-wide data shows and how it kind of really is connected to my schoolhouse. So I just really think it's important that we look at what we have in front of us and all of these really amazing supports that are already in existence in our school system, and how do we better align them with what our goals would be in regard to equity.
Great. Thank you for that. Is there any other suggestions?
This is Lena Polite again. I just would agree with Heather's statements, and for my previous statement about how the allocation of these budgeted funds plays into planning and curriculum and those types of things where equity can really take hold. I just want to make sure, again, as we're talking about these things, that when we're looking at the budget, that the allocation of those funds is also important.
Thank you. Any additional comments from others? Okay, and it looks like Mr. Thomas, you had some suggestions. Mr. Thomas, are you there?
Thank you. Yes, I saw Mr. Tillman turned his camera on. I don't know if he wanted to go, then he can go before me. I want to respect all the council members.
You're good. Go for it. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that one of the things I'd like this council to focus on is something that I've been focusing on in a lot of my small town halls is focusing on like maybe some curricula as well, school curriculum, and making sure we're being equitable in representation with our curriculum and diversifying our curriculum. That's something that was kind of mentioned a little bit by one of the council members earlier, I believe, but also focusing on social emotional learning in school and providing access to counseling. I think that's another big topic that maybe this group could use the data to drive a conversation and to discuss some of the disparities or some of the inequities that exist in those realms. So kind of curricula, and then I guess also social emotional support. Those might be some topics that we could discuss. But whatever the topics are, I really want the council members and in this group to drive those topics and to really bring up topics that you all are interested in. And so I like the idea that Mr. Handy had, or about focusing on that organization and how we can really best utilize everyone that's here to focus on their specific disciplines.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And it looks like I see in the chat, Ms. Tillman put something in the chat. Ms. Tillman, are you able to speak?
Sure. I think for me as a principal, not to sort of piggyback off of Heather too much, but in that Sam, Mr. Tillman talked about my brethren over there. Just speaking about really uplifting, refraining a little bit from broad brushing and making it is difficult to say, okay, well, what are the top three? Because all of our top threes will be different. I know that mine are different from Heather's, and Heather's is different from Kevin. I think that if we have more conversations around what the video that you showed us even spoke about, the interruption of predictability and what is still showing up for us in our buildings that are still causing barriers for our student groups. I think that is where we're able to make more equitable decisions, because we're able to say who's getting what, when, how. So I think that those kind of discussions should still be had. And I think that should still be extrapolated from the conversation. And what I was talking about was somebody else mentioned, I think it was Lena, was just sort of also providing a little bit lens around professional development in order to make some of these decisions a little bit easier for groups like this, because they're so large and they have so many different lenses. So that's kind of what I was sort of throwing in there to keep us from broad brushing a lot. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that. Looks like there's a comment from Ms. Rowe.
Yes, I would just, in the future, at some point, I'd like to discuss equity as it pertains to special education, but in particular, there have been a lot of feedback I've gotten from stakeholders about how, in some ways, virtual learning, even though it wasn't desirable for everyone, there are specific types of special education students who did benefit from it. And how are we going to continue to evaluate what we learned during the pandemic in regards to that, in continuing to provide FAPE and access to education for special education students?
Thank you. All right. And it looks like there is a comment from Mr. Tillman, Mr. Samuel Tillman.
Yeah, I know different schools have different sort of capacities to present professional development around equity. I'm thinking there are likely schools where maybe there's no one with sort of the expertise or the inclination to do so, but there may be a lot of interest in that kind of development. So instead of having schools sort of produce in-house development, if there was a way that schools could, principals primarily, I guess, would be the ones to make the ask, but some kind of protocol essentially for requesting a visit. I don't know if staffing in the Office of Equity would make that impossible, or sort of what the options are there, but I know that, there are likely schools that would take advantage of that if there was a system set up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Mr. Handy has some information.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Scott. And Mr. Tillman, thank you for the question. And Ms. Jones, thank you for your response. So, Mr. Tillman, we can certainly arrange that to something, and I can actually reach out to you directly, and I'll make sure that we work, begin to work with you and your colleagues there at Hereford High School. But that's certainly something I'll just, take this time to mention as a department. What you just mentioned is exactly what we're looking to do. And it looks like Ms. Tillman was in agreement with you as an area of interest. So we are certainly starting to work more with schools. We want to really be there with you all, with our partners, almost kind of, in one principle, we even called it like the residency model, but we want to make sure we are there to provide professional development, coaching for administrators and teachers. So that's something we're working towards this year. And actually, we'll have some information on that before the year's out. But I'll follow with you directly, and we can start to work with you around that.
Great. Thank you for that, Mr. Handy.
Yep, you're welcome.
Do we have any other questions or comments? No? Okay. And Mr. Handy, I would just say for just as far as our discussion here and everything, and as far as what was discussed, I know there's a record of, us discussing it here. Is there something, will it be put together and presented to Dr. Williams, or I guess what will the next steps be?
Yeah,
I think I asked that already. I'm re-asking it again, I guess.
Sure, no problem. I will, I'll summarize what we have. Like I know Mr. Thomas was taking notes, so I'll get some written document. I can get that out to the committee members. You all can review the notes. And then once you all are in agreement, what I've documented, I can, share it with Dr. Yarbrough, of course, and then we could move on from there. But I want to make sure you all, we capture everything. But I'll get something in writing. I know we have the recording as official minutes, but I'll get something in writing that you all can review, and then we can move forward from there.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, Ms. Scott, I didn't want to get ahead of you, but I can.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Okay, so I know we're running short on time. Are you okay if I close this out? Or I can use my closing comments and then turn it over to you to close out if you like.
Yes.
Okay. So just want to comment, I see some of our schools are having discussions around partnering, so I know they can do that on their own. In addition to that, that is another goal that we have with my department this year. So we've actually got some zone-based opportunities for equity liaisons to meet with my team, and we're going to start to facilitate more of that. So I'm glad to see that our council members are starting that discussion amongst themselves, but that's something we're going to continue to facilitate from my department, from my team. So next steps, we will meet in March. I'll work with the committee members to confirm that date, and we'll get the invitations out. And then you can look forward to one more meeting in May. But I want to thank everyone for their engagement and their input this evening. Ms. Scott, I'll turn it over to you if there's anything else you want to share before we close out.
Great. Now, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, their time, their feedback. This has been wonderful. I just want to see, is there any further business? Okay, looks like there's not. All right, and I'll just close this out. The next regularly scheduled Equity Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, January 20th, 2022 at 4 p.m. And so since there's no further business, the meeting is now adjourned. And I thank you all again for your time. Hope everybody has a good evening.